Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will continue our discussion of Chapter 7 of Freemasons for Dummies, the symbols of Freemasonry.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have three-quarters of our usual hosts. I'm starting with me this time. I never start with me. I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek Lodge number 243 in Montlake Terrace, Washington. And we have David Colbeth, who's a member of King Solomon number 60 in Auburn, Washington. And Craig Graham, who's a member of Kalamalka Lodge number 160 in Vernon, British Columbia. And Steve isn't here this evening, but we hope he's off having a good time with his family. So in our continuing discussion of Chapter 7 of the Symbols of Masonry, I feel like there were 3 pages there's a bunch of pages on the King Solomon's Temple that we sort of blew past. Is there anything that we missed that you guys feel like we should discuss, or just roll on?
Well,
I'm hearing roll on.
Yes, seeing that there's a potential for 90 symbols, and we've only gotten through 3 or 2 really 2 episodes.
Fair enough.
I mean, yeah, you're right. You're right. There is some pieces there we probably could have talked about, but yeah, they can go back and read it.
So the next symbol in the book, at least in my edition, is the square and compasses, which is, I would say, is the most readily identifiable symbol of Masonry. I am surprised it wasn't first in the list of symbols. I mean, it's on my shirt here. Craig's shirt is he's got the Working Tools Podcast official polo shirt on, and our logos are just exactly. It's everywhere. It's on my car license plate. It is the universal symbol of Masonry, although with or without the G, depending on where you are. But there's
actually, Matt, just quickly on that very point, is it generally, if it's the G, that more or less means North America, doesn't it? And if it's the G isn't there, doesn't it kind of mean the rest of the world?
That is my impression. Yeah, the more European Masonry is, most places there's no G. There just happens to be a lot of Masons in North America. So that's what we see.
Okay.
I'm zooming off topic here, but our previous minister at our church, his father was a Mason, and he found out that I was a Mason, and he had his father's old Masonic cufflinks. So he gave me his dad's cufflinks, and they do not have the G in them. He was a Mason in Ireland. So but yeah, it's definitely outside the U.S. is not as common. I think anything being in there outside the U.S. is not as common. Like you were just holding up your phone case, had the skull and crossbones in it. I think even that would be less frequent.
Yeah. I think that's one of those cut and paste symbols you can get off the internet, and of course it says memento mori around it as well. But certainly there's room for interpretation there, because if you look at the way that they're presented, generally the square is always 90 degrees, or at least most of the time it is when the symbol is drawn out. The compass is not always at that 60-degree mark that we would hope and expect them to be at least. So there's a lot of ways you can draw that, and a lot of interpretations you can draw out of that as well.
We both said North America is relatively common for the G. There are basically 3 countries in North America. I know Canada and the U.S. have usually use the G. Do either of you notice Mexico? The Mexican Grand Lodges have a G? I don't even know if G would be the appropriate letter.
Yeah, and I would have to say I doubt it. Yeah, because we have where in North America you have a largely English-speaking realm, G standing for God or geometry. It's probably different letters in a lot of different languages.
Right. And I've seen it with the yod for the ineffable name of deity, and yeah,
I've seen an old one too with the arm holding a hammer. I've seen that one. Yeah, that one's shown up in a few places in when I've seen pictures of English Freemasonry. Although that may also have been a pub symbol, I'm not sure. So I don't want to commit too much to that.
I've seen other square and compass symbols with other things in them that are for other orders, not
Mhm.
Freemasonry necessarily. I have seen that and wondered, is that uh, do they just take the symbol and use it, or do they, or is it maybe they were a Masonic order that became something or a subset or whatever? I don't know, but yeah, I've seen that with what I appreciated. Past Grandmaster Dean Heinemann, when he had his pin and coin and whatnot commissioned, he used the square and compass without the G on it. And I'm not giving anything away here because in our open installations, we have the great lights open. We're off session, but the great lights are open and the square and compasses are displayed. And so I'm not revealing anything that isn't true or isn't available. He said, well, what do you see when it's laid on the great lights? You don't see a G in there on the Bible or on the volume of Sacred Raw. It's just the square and compasses. And so that's why he used the.
I'm sorry. I'm just thinking I'm going to have to tell our senior deacon next time he opens the Bible to make sure that the square and compass is over a G on the page on the Bibles.
You're going to have to get one of those little G's out of those kits you get for, menu boards in restaurants. Press the letters into them and, soup of the day and just, get the G out of that and just kind of precariously balance it in there.
Exactly.
So, individually, I will say that I don't think I'm giving anything away, although I'll probably get myself in trouble here. The square and the compasses as symbols. Speaking of which, in BC and Yukon, is it compasses or compass?
We go compasses. Yeah.
That's what we do too. And I don't know. It still doesn't sound right to me. I've been a Mason for 20 years and it still doesn't sound right in my head. But
well, I always look at it this way. Compass is something you hope a compass is something you hope you have when you're lost in the woods. Compasses is something that you have when you're drawing out plans or trying to solve a geometry problem or something like that. But yeah, that's the way it was sort of explained to me once. But because plural, because each one is kind of I'm not sure. I don't quite know where the etymology comes from, but
it's like pants or
yeah,
whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure either, other than there was talk that at least in elementary school, whatnot, you'd have often the pencil, right? You'd have a compass, which was the single point with a pencil on it to draw, where the compasses are the 2 points, the plural of the 2 points, and not the single point. That was the only connection I ever had made. No real foundation of that other than my Wisconsinite upbringing.
Okay.
But yeah, and it's interesting that he doesn't refer to it as the compasses. He just refers to it as compass.
Right. I guess he's from Indiana, so maybe in Indiana they use the singular.
I don't know. It is a little bit different. I thought I saw in here somewhere. He does. Yeah, he does say in the more proper term is compasses, but Grand Lodges are divided over whether to use a single or plural. So
yeah, I don't honestly remember. It's been long enough ago since I read the book that I don't remember. Does he go into the circumpunct at some point? Is that
he does talk about, yeah.
Is it in there? Okay, good.
In that next section, he talks about point within circle and yeah.
So yeah, we actually, if you go back a few years in the feed, we actually have a whole episode or two, I think, about the circumpunct, and back when we were doing individual episodes about topics, and I thought it was a pretty good one, as I recall, but it's been a while since I listened to it. The compasses would be how you would make the circumpunct, right? You would put the point in the middle, and then you draw a circle around it, and that would be the way of generating that second symbol, which I guess we'll discuss later. But as to how to keep yourself within bounds, within the normal standards of behavior that one would expect of a man and a Mason.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some other geometric shapes and whatnot built off of that single compass circle. And it's really fascinating. We were traveling in Arizona a few years ago, visited, we just stopped off at the, I don't know, it wasn't the Grand Lodge. It was just a huge Phoenix Masonic Center. And the guy we ran into, he showed us the whole building. Fortunately, it was one of those fortunate circumstances, and he was able to show us all around. But then he drew on the outside. We're talking in the dirt. Basically, he had a presentation that he delivers, and so he kind of drew it out in the sand with the circles and the shapes. And I was like, I was just fascinated. I thought, man, I should have taken a video of that. How he did all that.
Including what did we talk about two episodes ago? We had talked about the fish symbol for Christianity. Some would argue that the fish is from the Vesica Pisces, which one would generate with a compass.
Mm-hmm.
And then the square is I feel like we talk about the square being a symbol of being a virtue and being things being a square deal and that sort of stuff, but I don't feel like I understand why the square is chosen as it's in the vernacular, it's in our ritual, but I don't really feel like I know why it is that. Do you guys? Am I being silly here?
No, but I think that it's probably one of the most important tools for construction, in the sense that if you don't have it, you're not going to. It's not going to look good at the end, and probably won't end well. I always remember. I don't know if either of you have ever seen the movie Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood and Gene Hackman, but Hackman's character in that film was attempting to build a house for himself in the woods before he got distracted by the other elements in the movie. And one of the other characters commenting, there isn't a right angle in that whole place. And so, obviously you lack the proper tools, and you're going to not get the job done. I mean, I'm probably vastly oversimplifying it, but I mean, I would have to imagine the square is a very, very, very old tool. So it would have found its way in there somewhere, and I can't help but think of it. It's a weird thing to say, but if it wasn't important, it wouldn't have ended up in there. But that's a loaded statement in and of itself too. So
I also always wondered how they made the first square. How did they decide that?
Well, it's the fourth part of a circle, Matt.
Oh, geez, silly me.
Don't we get that from a squared plus b squared equals c squared? So you've got to have elements that line up with what is it, 3, 4, and 5?
Mm-hmm. But again, supposedly there's a method to draw a square. Isn't that's how they trued the square? Was that they were able to use the compasses, and you can create an angle of 90 degrees from those circles, concentric circles, if you will.
That and if you have a single length, you can go 3 on the short side. It's been years since I've taken geometry, so I'm the language of geometry escapes me. But you've got the short side, which is 3, the next side, which is 4, and is it the hypotenuse, which is the long side? It would be 5, and then as long as any numbers follow that ratio, you'll get a perfect square on the right angle. That's right out of Euclid's. That's the 47th proposition of Euclid. Where is it? Yeah.
Yeah, 47.
Yeah.
Yeah, 47th proposition.
Almost the next symbol.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You're right. I feel like.
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say I feel like we have a lot of, and the square and compass is so universally a symbol of Masonry, and there's, I don't know, less than a page here, and we just sort of went past it, and I don't feel like I'm doing it justice, but I don't know what else I want to say about it either. So I ought we then just to move on to the 47th problem and then come back to.
Sure.
So, I mean, the 47th problem, we spoke about the 47th problem the other day when we talked about past master regalia, as I recall. It's usually it's represented as 3 squares, one of 3, 5, and 7 dimension or side length, and then you can make a right triangle in the between those three squares. There's a whole thing in our ritual about it being just the discovery of our ancient friend and brother, the great Pythagoras, which I always heard it was Euclid, or isn't it or
Well,
Pythagoras?
he talks about it here. I didn't realize there was 465 equations that Euclid had created, and I'm sorry, 465 equations, and the 47th of those equations that Euclid documented, the 47th was the Pythagorean theorem. I had never, in my 17 years, had never heard it described that way. Should have read this book, I guess. And so that makes much more sense, because I've heard it said 47th problem of Pythagoras is Euclid. I mean, all kinds of different ways people say it, and it never just clicked. And obviously, now reading it, that totally makes sense. I get it now.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Eureka.
Different guys, different circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's in the ritual too. But yeah, actually, I got to deliver the third degree lecture. I'm again probably going off topic here, but I got to deliver the third degree lecture at Eureka Lodge number 20 once and out here in just by Seattle. And I got to that point in the thing, and in the joy of his heart, he shouted, and everybody went, Eureka! It was pretty good. So yeah, I feel like like I said, we discussed that one somewhat under the past masters symbol section.
We did. I think tonight, as I was reading it again, and I know I begged on the other show, can somebody just describe this to me in layman's terms? And I think what throws me is when I said, okay, I read this, I get it, a squared, but just as how you described it, I get that geometric idea. But when I go back and I look at the symbol of the two equal squares over the larger square, it doesn't make sense to me. It seems like one of those should be three different sizes.
There should be one of them should be a square 3 by 3, so you have 9. The one that would be your smallest. The next one would be 4 by 5, which would be kind of leaning against it, and you have an odd angle there, and then 5 by 5 on the bottom. So, like I said, 3, 4, 5. So 9 plus 16 equals 25.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then the way that they balance together, it forms a kind of an odd looking triangle, but there is a right angle that is created out of that relationship.
I guess I'd have to look at it more closely, but it appears, at least at glance, and it's in small form, that there are two equal squares on that picture in the book. And so I guess that's what always throws me, is like, well, how does that work if they're the same size? But it's just 3 and 4, so it's a very small change.
Yeah.
Anyway,
probably hired the wrong kid to do the drawing there for him. But,
I mean, one could, in theory, do it a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b were the same, right? It would work out mathematically. It just wouldn't work out nicely in nice whole round numbers.
No,
there'd be some irrational numbers in there probably.
Yeah.
So to take a step back in the book, the previous we sort of skipped from square and compass to the 47th problem of Euclid. So there was a very brief section on the psi and the hourglass, which I personally think are pretty cool symbols in Masonry that represent the hourglass is a symbol of human life, which as the sands run, just as the days of our lives are exhausted, just like on the Days of Our Lives soap opera, as the sands through the hourglass. And the psi is an emblem of mortality, whereas we are all eventually are gathered in by our maker to into the next life. They're powerful symbols. I don't know that. Yeah, I guess one usually sees the hourglass with wings on it. I guess Tempus Fugit. Is that?
It indicate that time is flighty. I as much as I appreciate the silent hourglass and I understand the symbolism behind it, we were joking in the green room when I first started. Guys were commenting on my shirt, and I said, "Well, it's appropriately symbolic tonight." We were at a Dia de Muertos fundraiser for the youth group tonight, and which they did a great job tonight. But I guess to me too, the skull and crossbones is to me a more symbol of mortality than the silent hourglass. So maybe just the way I've applied it in my thought process. it certainly is. If if you see a scythe, in my mind, you automatically think of the Grim Reaper. And so,
not wheat.
no, well,
But I think, in my own mind, like if we're taking a personal spin on this, I would look at the hourglass and not necessarily think of mortality right away,
mhm,
but more like, what are you doing?
yeah,
There's this much on the top and this much on the bottom. What do you have to show for, what value have you given your own life and to others? Whereas the skull and crossbones is the much more, like that's it. And you can't take any of it with you either. So I think in a kind of a sense, they sort of balance each other out. You're going to end up at one down here anyways. So what are you doing with the time that you have left? And unfortunately, the other thing I look at, the especially with the scythe and the hourglass, these symbols tend to come up during degrees, but they don't seem to be. We generally don't seem to be carrying them through as fairly. Like we is Masons who don't mind showing our membership, we paste the square and compasses on everything, but we don't necessarily do that with the hourglass, the anchor, the scythe, and there's a bunch of other. I don't want to call them minor symbols because I mean they're very important, but we just don't seem to pay attention to them. Perhaps in a way that we should, if we're trying to be observant in everything that we've learned in the craft. You guys follow me on that?
I agree. Actually, I don't know if you can see it, but the home screen on my phone is actually the hourglass with the wings on it.
The
It's
wings on it, yeah.
from a picture from a grave or
Mhm.
a grave marker, headstone. That's the word I'm looking for. But yeah,
and
it's
and
I,
interesting minds that's the opposite. It's the skull and crossbones.
hey, whatever the symbols
Right.
mean different things, man.
Exactly.
I'm just thinking,
the
God, what a bunch of nerds we all are. Because I already showed you guys my phone case in an earlier episode too, with the memento mori on it, and I'm like, man,
Mhm.
yeah.
I've often thought when I'm doing the third degree lecture about the hourglass about putting some sand in my pocket, how the grains of sand pass away almost imperceptibly, kind of thing, and doing it
Yeah,
that way.
until somebody in the lodge says, "You're going to clean that up."
Exactly, exactly. I've also heard of a lodge. I think it was out of California. They were talking about their secretary has an hourglass that sits on his desk, and he turns it over, and when the meeting starts, and hopefully they finish within an hour, but usually they don't. But as
Mhm.
as a reminder that their lives are passing away while they're discussing what color to paint the walls and what wattage of light bulb to buy.
Yeah,
I thought about
That's
getting me one of those.
that's actually a hell of a good idea. If in a few years, if I end up sitting in the East, maybe I'll plunk one up on the master's pedestal and just like, okay, let's not waste any time here.
I my only caution of all that is that we have a lodge in our district that does exactly that. And
Okay.
shout out to Norm, St. Andrews Lodge, number 35 in Renton. He's a listener. Norm's a listener, and but anyway, as deputy and as I visit, there's always but they put it in the north, and there's a guy that sits up there in the north, and that's his job to put. And it's always a grumpy past master, and it's I appreciate the idea if it could be brought in as the idea of understanding that time is flighty, that you're losing time. But they often will say, basically, like you kind of said at the end there, Greg, let's get it done in an hour. And if we limit ourselves to an hour of discussion and then we got to go home, because they'll often look over to and they're paying attention to the time, what's left of it, rather than what's happening in the lodge. And then they'll, somebody inevitably will say, flip it over again, or whatever. And well, if you're just going to flip it over again, then what's the point?
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you could find if an hourglass wasn't an hour.
Well, okay, who was the quality control person that had to actually sort that out at some point to make sure that
Has anybody ever sat there and timed it? Oh,
yeah. It just I could see that being kind of a boring job actually, but
well,
catastrophic. But yeah, exactly. Like, oh
one
no,
grain at a time.
we need three more. We could crack open this one. We need three more grains in it to keep it keep it right on the hour.
What would be really cool is if, and maybe there's out there if you Google it, as the last grains dropped into the bottom, the weight would be register perfectly, and then a square and or a skull would light up. A skull and crossbones like that. Wouldn't that be cool?
Sounds like something out of a video game.
Yeah. Well, and the science to me doesn't represent weed; it represents death, because I'm a child of the '80s, right? So, the '80s horror movies. Anyway, well, we could probably get a couple more done, or you think we're close?
I was just typing in the chat that I forgot to start my timer. Well, I spelled it poorly, but yeah.
We can probably
do Jacob's Ladder, surely.
Yeah, we can get through a couple more. I mean, you already alluded to the Anchor Arc anyway, so.
So yeah, the Jacob's Ladder. I mean, I guess it is on our first degree tracing board, I think, but it's not. It's certainly not something that I think of as a Masonic symbol per se.
And I got to speak up for a sec here. One of you guys want to remind me exactly what the application of the symbol is? I know Jacob's Ladder is out of the Old Testament.
It's the Jacob's Ladder that Jacob saw extending from the earth to the heavens, and the angels are going up and down it. And the three principal rungs, I think is what it says in the ritual, are faith, hope, and charity.
Okay.
That's the only allusion I can remember to it.
Yeah, where it's the idea is that's the pathway to where Masons hope to attain at some point in life, is that spiritual place. And inevitably, to do that, this is the way I understand it, and I could be wrong, but this is my opinion, is that to obtain that ability to travel on that path, you have to have passed through these elements. And the other rungs are temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice.
Okay.
Together with the three primary, faith, hope, and charity, you inevitably pass through those virtues, and then obtain a passage to
the afterlife,
immortality, whatever. Yeah. I guess that's the way I look at it. I mean, he says that there's angels going up and down, but I don't know. I never heard of that necessarily. I've always thought of it as I guess I've seen it depicted that way, where the angels are on the ladder, but I guess I think of it as a pathway to a better life, if you will, or whatever, the afterlife.
And that reminds me, because there's another visible symbol that is in a lot of lodge rooms that I've been in that doesn't always get well explained, or at least not in the ritual I've seen. So your tassels hanging in the four corners. I don't know if this is something you see in Washington State. So something you'll see in Canadian lodges that practice Canadian work. And then each of the four corners of your physical four corners of the lodge room would have one of those attributes assigned to it: prudence, temperance, fortitude, and justice. I'd have to do a little more research to sort of figure out, in orienting the lodge room, which is which. But again, one of those things that if I had a bucket of paint and enough time and permission to do so, it would be one of those things like, okay, well, it's here. It's obviously important. Let's actually stencil those words on the wall in the appropriate places, so that meaning is clear and present to everybody that enters the room.
Yeah.
There is a lodge it's not in our district even, it's actually the next district up, that actually has the four tassels. And I've always sort of wondered about that, what the meaning of that was.
So if you get into it, those tassels are representative of those four virtues. And there should be a way of figuring out which virtue gets put in which corner, so to speak. I just forget. I forget what the association is. Yeah.
Nobody puts prudence in a corner.
No.
I other than in this couple sentences here he has in the book about Jacob's Ladder, I don't know that I've ever heard it being associated with the cardinal virtues, only with the cardinal virtues being prudence, temperance, fortitude, and wow, I did those out of order, so now I can't do it right. Prudence, temperance, fortitude, and justice. Not I've always heard the theological virtues, the faith, hope, and charity. Is that, do you remember ever hearing that before, or is that just me?
No, I don't. And for some reason, I always thought that in the biblical connotation that you had faith, hope, charity, and grace.
Hmm,
That there was four of
interesting.
them there somewhere.
We do allude to it in there's 7 rungs. The 3 principal of these are faith, hope, and charity. You're right. I don't think we say the other 4
Okay.
in the lecture necessarily, but we do allude that there are 7. And he does comment in there. There's that 3 again. There's the 3, 5, and 7 we talk about, the 3 again. So yeah, I've often thought, should we have a ladder in the corner with 7 rungs on it, and the 3 in the middle painted gold or something, or maybe even with the words on them or something, just to have it leaning up against the wall? I don't know. It'd have to be an awful long ladder with long steps to get to the ceiling in only 7 steps. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And a sign beside it saying, please don't climb.
Make them with breakaway steps. So
Right next to rinse and repeat. Sorry.
You know what though? I feel like those words could be useful in a few lodge meetings that I've been in, that I've seen. So
Mhm.
So the anchor and arc are emblems of a well-spent life and a well-grounded hope. I know one sees the anchor symbol as of hope. I've seen it other places, I'll phrase it that way, in rainbow or in churches or that sort of thing.
and the arc is what the symbol of
The arc, the divine
Symbol
arc,
of-
which wafts us across a tempestuous sea of troubles.
okay.
Yeah. I never quite understood the anchor, and why are you hopeful about the anchor, or how does hope how is hope connected to that particular symbol? Is it they threw the anchor over, they hoped it would grab, and I don't know. Always baffles me.
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know. I haven't had maybe opportunity to learn more about that.
Maybe one of our listeners know and will let us know on our and they reach out to us on YouTube or on the other formats where we are available. And with that, I think it's probably about time to wrap this episode up, with or without my timer. So on behalf of Craig and David and the absent Stephen and myself, we thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Goodbye.